Hello and welcome to a special edition of the show coming to you from New York. One of the world's most famous entrepreneurs wants to bring affordable space travel to a city near you. We speak with billionaire Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Empire. As leaders from around the world descended on New York City this week for the UN General Assembly, the debate on climate change has taken on a new sense of urgency. With major international summit planned for Copenhagen at the end of the year to replace the Kyoto Protocol, what's the best way to proceed? Well, my guest today says one answer is in outer space. He's one of the world's best known and most successful entrepreneurs, and now he's turning his energy to global warming. So Richard Branson has launched hundreds of companies over the past 4 decades, ranging from music and airlines to health clinics and space travel, all part of the Virgin Empire. A few years ago, he founded Virgin Galactic, which promises space travel for the public soon. But besides space tourism, its founder says the venture will benefit the environment as well. The company has built spaceships featuring hybrid rocket power that are fuel efficient, and its newest model can hold 2 pilots and up to 6 passengers. Virgin Galactic also aims to do atmospheric sampling and build equipment that can propel satellites into space at a fraction of the current carbon output. And one of Sir Richard's latest ventures, the Virgin Green Fund, is investing in sectors like wind and solar energy, emissions reduction and energy efficiency. So today we ask, what is the role of big business in the climate change debate? Remember, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and take part, and we'll take your phone calls on the show as well. Well, Sir Richard, good to have you with us.
Always good to be here.
Well, you know, it's ironic and perhaps something of a contradiction, but you run a major airline. You know, I think Virgin Airlines as a group has like 100-odd planes, and yet, of course, you're pushing very heavily for the environment too. Do you take a lot of flack for that? Is it hard to reconcile?
Well, I think I should take some flack, and because I run a number of dirty businesses, I realized that I've got to spend quite a lot of my time and energy trying to balance my books. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago that Al Gore came and knocked on my door and said, "Look, you know, why don't you, as a large figure in the business world, use yourself to try to get out there and try to be a good leader and trying to get other people on board." And so what we decided to do was to pledge 100% of the profits we made from our dirty businesses, our airline businesses, and our other transport businesses to tackle climate change, to try to come up with alternative fuels. And I think that was a better way than, say, selling our airlines and letting somebody else run them. So at least anybody that flies on Virgin Atlantic knows that any profits that we make are going to go towards trying to solve the problem. Well,
it was almost exactly 3 years ago that I caught you down the road at the Clinton Global Initiative, and you'd made that pledge, and everyone, of course, was scrambling to get hold of you. How has that promise, that pledge, what sort of results has it produced so far? Have you been able to gauge?
Well, we've had some breakthroughs. There's still a long way to go. I think there's a fuel that one of the companies that we've invested in has developed called isobutanol, and we think that fuel, which won't eat into the food supply, has every chance of being a fuel that aeroplanes will be able to use in the future. We've also invested in a company that's producing algae, and again, the advantage that algae has is that it doesn't eat into the food supply. So those 2 fuels are pretty well carbon neutral, and I think could potentially be very good fuels for the future for airplanes.
You mentioned Al Gore had come to you. Legend has it you were something of a climate skeptic before you really spoke with him. Was that the case?
Yes, I mean, I think I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. I'd read, 1 or 2 books that were quite, the skeptical environmentalists were slightly skeptical, and I think it was quite convenient as a transport owner to take that approach. And I think a lot of people, 4 years ago, it hadn't really come top of their pile. But I mean, since then, I've met numerous scientists, Tim Flannery, James Lovelock, and sadly, I'm convinced that we have a major problem, and that unless we do something about it, our children are going to inherit a world that's nowhere near as nice a world as the one that we've lived in.
The deadline for your Earth Challenge, February 2010, is coming up, when you've said you're willing to offer a prize of $25 million to anyone who can help take greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Any signs of anyone picking up that prize yet?
Well, we'll certainly extend the deadline if they don't. So we're not going to sort of cut off and close it down. I think the best idea that's come in is something called biochar. Basically, and a number of people have no one person sort of claimed, the original idea, but basically it's to turn the waste product in the fields into charcoal, and then to crunch it up and plow it back into the fields. And the exciting thing about that is that if we can get the right machines to do that, you're talking about effectively all the liquid fuels in the world, all their carbon output would be buried again every year. And that'll be a major breakthrough. So, all planes emissions, all cars emissions, lorries, buses, trains, etc., will be buried again. There are technical problems trying to find, machinery that every farmer wants to use. But that's the most hopeful one.
Of course, the UNGA, the climate debate is a big one as well, and people have been talking a lot about this. There seems to be a bit of a gridlock over who's really responsible and who should be paying for the carbon emission reductions, the cutting carbon emissions, with the rich saying the poor should clean up their act, and the poor saying the rich should actually be paying more to make up for what they've done and still keep doing. Where do you stand on that debate?
Well, I mean, the best way of dealing with carbon is going to ultimately be to find cost-effective alternatives. So, obviously the best way is not to penalise anybody, but to come up with major breakthroughs that can actually, power our boats and our planes and our buses cleanly, and hopefully as cost-effectively as the current dirty fuels. In the meantime, there's going to have to be a breakthrough at Copenhagen, and I think that as long as every company around the world plays their part equally, then all of us are willing, I think, to take the burden. So, if every major airline in the world, has an extra tax on fuel, we can survive and we can flourish.
Joint effort, basically.
I think there is. I mean, in the last week, you've had China making some hopeful noises, and constructive noises. A month ago you had the Prime Minister of Japan coming out with some incredibly brave, constructive statements. I mean, most countries, Australia, most countries are playing their part. The one we're now waiting for really is America. And
I guess it helps, though, that there's now a president who's less in denial about climate change, though.
Yes, but it seems that he's got to get Congress on board as well. But at least we have an America that has a president that believes that there is a major problem and that something needs to be done about it.
Anwar's on the line from Paris. Anwar, thanks for joining the debate. What would you like to add?
Hello, thank you, Riz. Thank you, Mr. Benson. I'd like to ask Mr. Benson that this last year and this year it was very hard for the whole world economically. How hard was for the Virgin Group economically? And then second part, Mr. Benson, do you have any plan extra charity for the poorest people in this world at this moment? Because it was very, very hard for the all over the world for the poorest. Do you have any charity plan at this moment? Thank you.
Okay.
Two big questions. Thank you. Now, I think, the Virgin Group is quite well diversified and has, generally speaking, managed to deal with this financial crisis quite well. Having said that, if there's any one business that is suffering a bit, it's the airline businesses, where, for instance, Great Britain was quite reliant on the banks, and there's many less bankers travelling and so on. But we'll batten down the hatches and we'll survive and we'll come out of it. I think you're absolutely right that there's a danger that in times of financial crisis that the poorest people in society suffer, and we've tried to make sure that our charitable foundation, Virgin Unite, has as much money as it had or more than before the financial crisis. And what we try to do is be entrepreneurial in our approach to to conflict situations in the world, or famine situations in the world, or disease situations in the world, and approach these things perhaps slightly differently than other foundations. So look at major problems in the world and see if we can come in a slightly more entrepreneurial way. So we are still investing quite heavily.
We had a question that came in through our Facebook page from Karachi in Pakistan, and Tariq Abbasi wrote in saying, why only work for the environment, tourism, etc.? The basic need is peace. Why not work on that? Now, actually, you've mentioned you do actually tackle a lot of things, and you actually helped to found the Elders as well, which involves some leading statesmen, Archbishop Tutu and Dr. Muhammad Yunus of Grameen Bank, Jimmy Carter, former US president. So are you seeing any particular results from that kind of grouping? I mean, they've got a tough challenge, basically. Have they been able to make a dent in any way?
Well, first of all, I think the question is absolutely right in that unless you have peace in a country, nothing else works. Education falls apart, the health of the nation falls apart, people get unnecessarily maimed and wounded, children suffer. And so we did set up, or helped to set up, an organization called the Elders, which with Nelson Mandela and Gracia Machel, his wife, and Archbishop Tutu, about 18 months ago. And the Elders are 12 incredible men and women from around the world, people with high moral authority, and their job is to go into conflict situations using their international status and their people like Kofi Annan, who've got enormous respect in the world. I mean, one example was about a year ago when Kenya was falling apart. Kofi Annan, Gracia Machel, and Archbishop Tutu went into Kenya. They knocked the heads together of the president and the prime minister in waiting, who thought he'd won the election. A coalition government was formed, and the civil war stopped, and it hasn't broken out again. They've done a lot behind the scenes in Zimbabwe. They're working hard, trying to help reunify Cyprus. They've just come back from Israel, Palestine, where they're obviously trying to help the process towards maybe getting a two-state solution, and so they are working hard to try to get these situations resolved.
Well, just before we take a break, let's see what Juliana in Kenya. Thanks for joining us from Kenya. What would you like to ask or say?
What I want to know is that the global warming has had a very adverse effect, especially in Africa. We have a lot of drought going on right now. What I want to ask is, it took people so long to realize this, and now that it has happened, it's affecting a lot of poor people out here.
Okay, Juliana, what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on the issue of Africa and some of the things that have been raised, or at least been raised in front of Sir Richard's attention in just a moment. We're going to take a very short break here. When we come back, we'll also touch on Virgin Galactic and the promise of consumer space travel. During the break, we're going to conduct an instant poll in our live station chat room. Today we're asking, given the chance, would you go into space? We've posed that question to the people on the streets of New York this week, and here's what they had to say.
But I'm not going up there until I know.
Until you know you're not going to die, that it's safe, that you can go there and live.
No, I'd send him.
Sure, I'd go in a New York minute.
Well, absolutely, because, I mean, just to be an experience, a one-in-a-lifetime chance to go into space is just so amazing.
Because it would be such an amazing adventure. Weightlessness and seeing the world from there instead of here, we totally would go.
It depends on how long it would be. Because I've travelled from Australia here, and it's the flight. I can't deal with flying.